What's up, guys? It's your boys, Taylor and Taylor, coming back at you with episode 24 of the Empirical Scouting Podcast. It's draft week. This time of year always amps me up. I mean, all the mock drafts, all the trade scenarios, all the draft selections, storylines, just everything that we have heard and talked about over the last few months. We finally get to see it play out in person live this coming Thursday. It's going to be a pretty interesting draft, I want to say. There's a lot of prospects. I mean, outside of the number one overall pick, it's kind of one of those first years that we've had that we don't really know what's going on with number 2, number 3, and so on. So I'm definitely excited to see it all play out this coming Thursday. But today, we're going to actually talk about your official 2024 NFL draft prospects. Big board, you've kind of finally completed it. You got a lot of good things going. I did not get my chance to rank all the prospects. I have mine a little bit in different tiers, but I didn't get them, like 1 through 200 or so. So we're not going to go over all 200. I believe we're just going to go over your top 50, kind of point out some of the things that you're seeing, some of the guys that you might like that you haven't seen high up on draft boards, and vice versa. Guys that we're not going to be on your list that we do see we're pretty high up. I can think of a couple of those off the top of my head as well. So are you ready to dig into your draft board?
Yeah. I guess real quick, we'll just talk through methodology of how I build my board and such, just for the people to know. Pretty much I grade each position based on traits with a weighted average value producing. That's their final grade. And then that's how I get the individual position rankings. And then from there, that number is I call it the true talent score or rating. So that's, individual positions. And then it goes into the big list, right? I adjust every position, their true talent score, by a weight that's based off of what it costs for the NFL. So quarterbacks get weighted up. There's added value for quarterbacks because quarterback contracts are very expensive. I add value to wide receivers, to edge rushers, to corners. And then, on the other side of that, interior offensive line, interior defensive line, linebacker, they get kind of a little tiny deduction almost. Because those are kind of positions, and running back, those are positions that are devalued at the NFL level. Their contracts aren't expensive. Running back is the major one of that. So what that does is it'll take a true talent score, and then you get the adjusted score. And then those adjusted scores are how each player is stacked up on the board. So what that means, though, is that you can get situations where a player will have a first-round grade, and players with second-round grades are actually rated above them on my big board. And I do have that this year. I had it last year as well. A great example of that's going to be like a running back that gets a first-round grade, maybe lower on my big board than a quarterback with a second-round grade. Just happens. But that was just a real quick insight onto my methodology on how I built the board.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of fair because you see all the time how people always talk about, you don't really draft like an off-ball linebacker in the first round, a running back in the first round. Some of those positions, a defensive tackle, unless they're going to be Aaron Donald, you don't really draft those kind of guys in the first round. So kind of scoring them relatively to how the NFL views those positions when it comes to the NFL draft. It makes sense to me. But with no further ado, we will bring up your first page, which is going to be your top board of 41 to 50. I'll let you take the floor right here. Point out anything that you're seeing or the reasons for some of these guys in these positions.
So I guess the number one thing that will stand out to me is Peyton Wilson coming in at 45. He is currently my top off-ball linebacker. He's the only one that's going to be in my top 50. I'm a fan of Peyton Wilson in a lot of ways. There's a lot of fun qualities when you watch his film. He's got, I'm not saying he's an Isaiah Simmons player. I'm not comparing him to Isaiah Simmons, but there's some like Isaiah Simmons to him where like you watch him and you can see him taking snaps at like free safety or a slot corner almost, or like edge rusher. So like he kind of moves around and it's pretty fun to watch. He's got some really good instincts and he shoots the gap really well to blow up run plays. which is something I really, really look for and value with linebackers. I've, speaking as someone who played that position in my lifetime, at the low level that I did, it's those instincts are something that are hard to really teach and have an off ball linebacker do without just them knowing how to do it. So I value that, and I think he does a great job at doing that. The other big things here, I guess, are going to be Spencer Rattler making the top 50. There's one pretty big name quarterback that will not be in the top 50. I guess we can get to it later. There may be some guesses initially. And then I'll mention TJ Tampa and Dwayne Carter, two guys that made it into my top 50, and I very much enjoyed watching them. TJ Tampa was a very fun evaluation. He's just a very long corner he's good. I like him a lot, honestly.
Yeah, and I think the first thing when I'm looking at this, other than Spencer Rattler, that jumps out, because I knew I was high on Spencer Rattler. I didn't realize that you were as high on Spencer Rattler as I am. But it's going to be that you have 4 defensive tackles on this kind of range, this tier of talent. You got Mekhi Wingo, who I'm a big fan of. Michael Hall Jr., who I believe you're a big fan of. And then you got Devontae Straw. He's kind of taking a little bit of a tumble. Pre-combine, he was getting possibly not first round looks, but high second round looks, and now he's kind of tumbled down. Probably back to where he should be in that day 2, day 3, or round 2, round 3 range. Definitely still think he's good enough to be a day 2 pick. And then Dwayne Carter, a guy I think last time we talked about defensive tackles you hadn't really looked at. So just real quickly, I just want to know a couple things about Dwayne Carter. Exactly what do you see in him? Because I haven't been informed about him yet.
Plays with a great motor. He gives a lot of effort. He's got huge hands, and he's got a very good bull rush. His bull rush is when he gets it, and he gets it well. Like, he's collapsing the pocket from the interior, almost guaranteed. They lined him up, all over the line. So there is some, possibility you could stretch him out to play like a 5 tech if you really wanted to. So like a 3-4 defensive end. I like the idea of playing him at a 3 tech. I think that's going to be where he's best, slotting in at the next level. But, the alternative is that he's a little bit older. So he's going to be, I want to say 23, nearly 24 when week 1 hits. Didn't really have a lot of like box score production in college, which is like, it's frustrating when you see players like doing well but not finishing the job or finishing the play. Sometimes he just won't disengage to pursue. Like, he'll just keep fighting with his guy when the play is not going to be going towards him anymore. And instead of just pushing that guy off and running away, he'll just keep going at it. And, that's just kind of a wasted effort at that point. But overall, like, he's a fun player. I think he's got, a role at the next level for sure. And I speaking to all of it for the defensive tackles here, I think it's just a testament to the defensive tackle class in general, because this is my defensive tackle 3, which is Wingo through 6. And then, we all know who like the consensus top 2 are. They'll be in here later. But, outside of these guys, it's just, or outside of those top 2, they're all bunched together, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So right before we move on to the next group of prospects that you have, if you had to choose one guy out of this list right here, 41 to 50, to be a surprise pick in the first round, who would it be? Just one.
Surprise pick in the first round. Oof. I probably would go with it's going to be either Michael Hall or TJ Tampa. I lean TJ Tampa because of like that added value that corners do get, especially at the end of the first round. And the fact that there's a lot of good corners in the first round that are probably going to fly off the board like all in a row. I feel like at some point there's going to be a run.
Yeah.
So I could see TJ Tampa sliding in like that 29 to 32 range easily, honestly. Michael Hall, like, I think he could do it, but there's just too many question marks with his profile
Yeah,
that makes me question it.
I agree. I mean, I think Michael Hall that he didn't really show it as much, so I think waiting until day two for his selection would be the best. But TJ Tampa, if I had to think about it, would be the number one person. I personally, I like. I think Spencer Rattler should over a couple other guys that possibly would that we will either talk about or maybe not even completely omit that won't be on your list. But yeah, TJ Tampa out of this list is the guy I was eyeing too. So I just want to see if you're on the same page. Also, like we're moving over to our 31 to 40 range. I'll let you take the floor real quickly because there's two things that pop out at me immediately when I look at the screen. So take it away. Give me like just an overall encompassing view of these guys on the screen right here.
There's a lot of talent here. I think there's a lot of these guys are all bunched together in the same tier for me. Um, Troy Franklin, I believe, is the lowest graded player on the screen here. I have a third round grade on him. Everyone else here has a second round grade. But like I was saying earlier, tight ends get pushed down value wise, wide receivers get pushed up. So that's how Troy Franklin's above Jatavion Sanders for me. But I'm a fan of all these wide receivers that you're going to see on the screen. There's a lot of wide receivers for 10 slots. And I think each one can play a certain role within an offense and be very productive and useful at the next level. I think Austin Booker is probably going to be the one that either Austin Booker or Ricky Pearsall will be like one of those guys that I'm going to probably have rated higher than consensus. I think people are going to be kind of surprised I have Booker in the top 40. But I'm a fan. Like since day one, like when I really watched him, I've been a fan. You know that.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure you're pretty happy that your boy is slotting in the top 32 for me. So
Nah,
Liam
he needs to get
McConkey.
higher. Need him to be higher.
If
That's fine.
if he was about 20 pounds heavier and still as athletic, he'd be very much
Yeah.
higher.
Yeah. But the thing that what you kind of alluded to that stood out for me is kind of just they're right next to each other at 33, Chris Braswell, and 38, Austin Booker. I know you personally were a little bit higher on them pre-combine. I don't believe Braswell tested at the combine, if I'm not mistaken, and Austin Booker didn't really have the greatest showing at the combine, unless I'm confusing the two. But I believe that's correct. I just wanted to point out that it was interesting to see that you're still, you're standing your ground. You're still that high on those two guys.
I mean, so here's the thing. There may not be the freakiest athletes, but if they were freaky athletes, they would be top 15 players instead of top 50 players, if that makes sense. Like, like looking through, we'll start with Austin Booker. He's light, but we knew he was light.
Yeah.
He's got long arms, big hands, and he's about, around average, around that 40 to 60th percentile for most of the athletic testing. And then, his broad jump's actually in the 73rd percentile. So like, I'm not worried about that personally for his combine performance. And then let me pull up what Braswell did. I mean, Braswell's short, a little bit on the shorter side, not a big deal. He's lighter, but like once again, we kind of knew he was going to be lighter. Dude's got a good wingspan, bigger hands, and he ran a good 10-40. I'm not worried about any of it. Like these guys, both of these guys are upside plays that you're wanting to take at the end of the first round or the beginning of the second round. And honestly, what we can throw Chop in there too. All of these edge guys here are those upside edges. And each one comes with their pros and their cons. Chop's that a freaky athlete, right? With that freaky speed and get off. But Austin Booker's got a better pass rush repertoire, in my opinion. And then Chris Braswell's got, he's more polished than Chop. So it's just, this is going to be kind of what you think you can do with each one, where you can fit each one, and such.
That makes
So
sense.
that's just where I'm at.
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap up this screen right here, in my opinion, I don't want to get what you believe. Kind of go into who might be selected in the first round, because this is kind of where we're starting with the first round. You got Johnny Newton there. I'm pretty sure he's virtually locked into the first round. And that's that defensive tackle position that we talked about that kind of gets pushed back. But I believe him and another guy that I'm sure is coming up here shortly are probably going to be first round picks for sure. Chop Robinson's been getting some hype about that. I don't know if he'll necessarily get selected at the back end of that first round, but he certainly can. And then Tyler Guyton as well, because we're all expecting a offensive tackle run to occur throughout this draft, and he might just get pushed up a little bit based off of needs. And then we talked about last episode with that whole, like, what will Buffalo do, Baltimore, and then also Kansas City with their wide receiver position. How many of those actually draft wide receivers? We're probably going to see one of either Lamataki or possibly Xavier Legette, maybe even Ricky Pearsall. I haven't seen that yet, but mostly what I'm pointing at is Lamataki or Xavier Legette. At least we're both high on Xavier Legette, and all things are pointing that he's going to get drafted by Carolina at the first pick in the second round if he's there.
I don't know how much I believe that.
It's a lot of
I know
smoke.
he said it, but it's like,
yeah.
But I do think
Legette
is I think Legette is a top 40 lock virtually.
Mm-hmm.
Like if he's not picked at the end of the first round, he's going early in the second round. He's that type of receiver that will go early. On this screen, besides Newton in Guyton, like Legette would be my pick here for like a first round pick. Pearsall, I have him at 35, so like theoretically you could justify it, but I would not take Ricky Pearsall in the first round, despite like how you could justify it, just because I don't see the upside of it. I see him more as like a great role player for your team. So that's a guy, like, despite his grade and his ranking, I would very much be like, okay, he's somebody I'll consider in the second round.
Yeah.
Excuse you.
Is that Chipper?
Yes, that's Chipper.
What's up, Chipper? But okay, perfect. So once Chipper allows us to, we can move over to our 21 through 30 range. So I'm going to let you go ahead and take the floor, give me just an overall encompassing view, and then we'll dive into some of these prospects.
All right. Well, this is where the controversy is definitely going to start. I can already tell the quarterbacks will be controversial. And, Latu at 24, though, is where I'm going to point out. He is at 24, and that is despite how talented he is. The current smoke or rumors or murmurs are that his medicals are fine. He's going to, it's checking out. Like, he's going to be a top 10 pick is where people are at. And speaking what I've said since the get-go with our initial Edge episode, I'm not privy to those medicals or the physicals. But if I was, and those medicals looked fine and checked out and like there was going to be no issues, he would be a top 10 player on my board. He would be my edge one. So Latu at 24 is low, but like it's just me hedging.
And I just want to say one thing about the Latu's situation is that I was kind of reading on Twitter, especially with all the hype of him possibly going at 8 to us, the Atlanta Falcons. And someone made a good point. It's that we have not heard one team say anything about his medicals. We have not seen one report that a team has taken him off their board for the medicals. There has been absolutely nothing. And he wasn't injured either. Like, he played the whole season. He wasn't.
Oh, he's played multiple seasons without
That's what I'm
injuries.
saying. So,
yeah,
the medical thing, when you sit back and think about it, it's really blown out of proportion. Like, it's a serious injury. Don't get me wrong. But people act like he's been hurt every single year of his career. And that's just unfair to him.
So the medical thing is like, there's two guys that I will directly compare his medical situation to that are currently in the NFL. It's Jalen Phillips and Benjamin St-Juste. I want to say I told the Benjamin St-Juste story on here before. Basically, like, they kind of tricked him into medically retiring at Michigan, and he didn't want to, and he was just rehabbing a normal injury. He just was it took a little bit longer. And then Phillips, like, was actually like kind of a legitimate thing as far as I know. And then like he was just like, I do want to play football, and they wouldn't clear him at UCLA, so he left. Latu, like from all intents and purposes, like it seems like it was a legitimate thing, but he got cleared and he's played without injury issues since then.
Yeah.
Like you said, it seems a little bit blown out of proportion. That's because it kind of is, but that's because we as the general public don't know what the medicals are. There's things that will show up in those detailed physicals, MRIs, X-rays that you won't even, like. There's things like we got an MRI and X-ray will show up that we wouldn't even know. But we don't know we have a neck injury or something like that. But like for all we know, I have early stages of spinal stenosis going on. Like I don't know. I could. So that's where it's at. Part of why we probably haven't heard NFL teams talking about it openly is because they want to play that closer to their chest. They want if his medicals are fine, they want him to fall to them because other teams are afraid of the medicals. Or if they're not fine, then it's because he's just going to straight up drop, and they're not even wasting their time thinking about him in the first round. Maurice Hurst and was an example of that. Reuben Foster fell to the end of the first round for medical issues that we didn't even hear about until draft day.
If I'm not mistaken, that you really were pounding the table for him, weren't you? Like at the back end of that first.
Oh yeah, I mean, and like Reuben Foster, I will say I think he failed for reasons beyond talent. And that's stuff that I can't assess from my point of view. But like Reuben Foster, just from a pure talent point of view, is like one of the best, most talented linebackers I've evaluated. And I want to say, like, going into draft day, like he was still like a top 10 pick to most people. Like in media wise, we had no idea his shoulders were apparently destroyed until draft day when he was falling. But yeah, I mean, I'll maintain Reuben Foster, great talent at linebacker, like up there. Luke Kuechly's like the prime example, best linebacker I've ever seen play, period. Reuben's one of the better college guys.
So we have Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix here at 22 and 26, and we've talked about it a lot, so we don't need to get into it too heavy. But give me some of your thoughts here, because they're both, within the top 32, so they both should be first-round picks. We know Jaden Daniels is locked in the first round. He's probably locked in the top 3. But Bo Nix is the one that kind of stands out a little bit because we've seen some recent mocks that he might slide back into that first round. We talked about the odds in the last episode, and it's kind of alluding to that he's not going to get drafted in the first round. So what are your just quick takes on Bo Nix, and then also in relation to Jaden Daniels ranked at 22?
Bo Nix is benefiting here from the QB value bump that I incorporate. I mean, I have a second round grade on him. He's not necessarily a quarterback I would love drafting in the first round, especially as early as like the rumors are right now. I like him a lot though overall. Like I think there's a good deal to work with, and he's the classic example of a guy like I would be willing to take in that like 33 to like 50 range. And you let him be either that bridge quarterback or like, throw him out there immediately. We've seen some guys like that. Will Levis, Jimmy Clausen back in the day. Andy Dalton was even that for the Bengals at one point. So like, that's the kind of quarterback value I have on him. Jaden Daniels also has a second round grade for me. Him at 22 is like, I know it's controversial, and it's weird. I've mentioned it before. Like I was a Jaden Daniels fan going into the season. Like I had him in the top 5 after the summer. And I think the hype machine's gotten too out of control with him. I don't value him as a top 3 quarterback, top 3 pick. I think people have kind of become too enticed by the idea of like this running quarterback, but like there's so many issues there that seem to be kind of getting swept under the rug. And I think social media's noticed it too. Like at this point, like I'm not saying I know more than the NFL. I'm not saying social media knows more than the NFL, but there has been many examples of like NFL teams just ignoring blatantly obvious things in their face because they think they're smarter than everybody and it backfiring. And I'm sure you know like examples off the top of your head, me saying that. Like, and that's what Jaden Daniels in the top 3 feels like. This guy, as a quarterback, like there's a lot of things there that leave a lot to be desired, especially as a 5-year starter in college. I don't know. That's just my spiel. Like, what's overall? What is the upside here? Is where I'm at.
Yeah, I think it's the whole running quarterback thing, the excitement, the Heisman Trophy. I'm a little bit higher on Jaden Daniels than you. I would draft him in the top 10 just for that upside. But all the red flags and like the question marks you have on Jaden Daniels, so it's 100% fair. We've seen it over and over again where people get kind of enticed with what they see on the field at college. And like you said, they kind of ignore some of the question marks that they should have on it and just kind of roll with the dice.
So just to play devil's advocate here, and I understand this is a little bit ironic coming from a guy that was a huge Anthony Richardson fan last year. Yeah. But I was like, the athleticism was secondary to why I liked Richardson so much. Like I thought that he was operated in the pocket incredibly well, and he had rare arm strength. So Jaden, I think gonna have a below average arm when it's all said and done, like in the NFL, like as a starting quarterback, like top 32, he's gonna be in the bottom 16 to me. So to play devil's advocate, how many mobile quarterbacks truly like lasted a long time in the NFL with a mobile play style?
Yeah, and it's not many. Not at all. Yeah,
Michael Vick and Cunningham.
But they both
Vic had time off.
And they had the arm.
Yes. Vic developed.
Yeah.
And had an elite arm.
Yeah.
Cunningham was great. And then, Cam had a huge peak, but Cam fell apart physically. And this guy's a much bigger guy.
I was gonna say, and Cam Newton's body is a completely different thing than Jaden Daniels. And if he's breaking down after like 8 years.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw RG3 break down, and RG3 is like my comp, and I think the closest body style to Jaden Daniels. And it's like, even RG3 broke down very, very fast.
Yeah, I think with selecting Jaden Daniels, it sounds bad because you don't want to do this in the top 3, which is probably why you have him rated a little bit lower and why you wouldn't draft him in the top 10 or so, is you're not really drafting him to be your quarterback of the future for 15 years. You're going to draft him to be the quarterback of the next 5 to 7 years, and just kind of hope that magic happens. Because I think that's what people are thinking about with Lamar Jackson right now. It's just how long is he going to hold up? I mean, we both agree Lamar Jackson's arm talent is a lot better.
So the one thing with, the arm talent's that, and then number 2, Lamar has changed his style in these last couple of years. And you probably can attest to that more than I can, but Lamar's become more cautious about taking hits and not necessarily looking for the home run as a runner anymore, whereas now he just gets what he needs to get and he'll get down or get out of bounds. So he's being proactive and making sure he's not taking as many hits so he avoids injuries.
Yeah. It makes sense. But we'll move on from this. Everything else we've talked about Malachi Corley plenty of times, so we don't need to get into him. He's a little bit higher than the consensus, but we both love him. Debo Samuel 2.0. I would definitely take him with late first. But we'll move over to the 11 through 20 range. We have a couple Washington guys, Roma Dunze at 11 and Troy Fontenot at 13. We see a couple Bama boys right between them at 12 and 14 with Terrion Arnold and Dallas Turner. And we got 2 more quarterbacks, which is the first thing we'll talk about, 15 with Drake May and 17 with JJ McCarthy. So that's what I was alluding to, is that you have JJ McCarthy ranked ahead of and Drake May, of course, ranked ahead of Jaden Daniels. We talked about why on Jaden Daniels. Real quick, minute or two on each guy. What do you see on them that you trust higher to be in a top 20 rankings of your big board?
Upside. They're both younger. They're both true juniors coming out, rather than a fifth year senior. And then on top of that, Drake May has he has much more arm talent to work with while having similar athleticism in a lot of ways. And then JJ is also, once again, very similar athlete. And I think he's got a better arm overall, and I think he's got a better handle on the mental side of the game, to be honest. I'm a JJ fan. He's the highest he's the highest possible you can be without having a first round grade. You add one hair to the scale for him, and he tips to a first round grade for me. So that's where I'm at. I like JJ. I think JJ is the rare, safe pick with a high upside. I think this guy's got a high floor of being, at worst, a average type of starter in the NFL. He's when I say average type of starter, think like Jared Goff for the Rams. Obviously different play styles, but a guy that can manage the game just fine for you without, he's not going to carry your team, but he's great at managing your game. That's the floor for JJ, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you've been pretty high on JJ versus the consensus ever since, before the season even started.
He was my QB3 going into the season.
This has been one of your guys that you could truly say is you've been on this train for a while now.
I think my top 5 are all the same, actually. I can't remember. I know my top 4 for sure are, but I think my top 5 are also the same from the summer.
Yeah, mine's changed drastically. But we'll move over to hit on some of the other guys. I want to talk about Grant Barton real quickly because you have him as your number 20 overall player. A lot of draft boards, or mock drafts, I should say, you don't really see him go in the first round. If you do, it's going to be later on the first round, or he slides into that second round. Just real quickly, tell me some of the highlights you see on Grant Barton that why you have him so high.
Well, we've hit on it before, but he's extremely versatile along the line. He played a full season as a starter at center, and then he's played 2 full seasons starting at left tackle. Odds are he can slide. Odds are he's not going to have an issue if he wanted to play him at guard either, although he never actually played it. But his arms are short, so there's that issue. He's got the classic Peter Skoronski, Rashawn Slater type of debate that's going to happen or whatever. I think most teams view him as an interior player. I graded him as one. But, similar to Skoronski and Elijah Vera Tucker and Elton Jenkins, guys like that. I think he's a great player that you can slide in on the interior immediately, and in a pinch with depth issues, slide him outside if needed. Dude's got crazy good grip strength, and he plays with a mean streak. He plays with the mentality of finishing the block, getting his he wants to get his guy to the ground. So I don't know, man. He's just a very good all-around guy, prospect that I struggle to see him being bad. I think he's a good starter at worst, and when you have that, I that's valuable to a degree. So
it's going to be more of the safe play. Like you say, he's extremely versatile. So, he needs to play left guard versus right guard. You throw him out into right tackle if you even need to. I believe he played center as well. So he could play a lot of positions across the whole line. So even at the end of the day, if you have a plug and play guy that, your right tackle goes down, you need to throw him over there, and you have a backup guard that you rather play at guard than your backup tackle, then you could do that. So it adds that extra versatility. I'm kind of like having a utility guy for a baseball team, where you could slide them into different positions and be okay, I can the strongest backup you have will play instead of the backup that you need. Say your right guard is your strongest backup on the line, and that's his main position, that's his best position. But the right tackle goes down, and you're well, I want the right guard to play. You could slide, you can mix and match some guys around to bring it in, and that's something that Grant Barton especially had. But at the end of the day, he's a guy that kind of a plug and play. Like you throw him in the line right now, and he's gonna be able to hold his own.
And we're kind of down. We're talking up how safe he is and stuff like that, but we're actually kind of downplaying one of the most important parts of his profile. Dude had elite athletic testing, like elite athletic testing for interior linemen. Like, so as good as he is, as safe as he is, like this guy is a great athlete that you theoretically he has upside to still too. Like there's still like little tiny technical deficiencies that he has, like such like this hand placement and such that can get better. And then on top of that, he's a great athlete. So like, he's stacked right next to Mims. Mims is that ultimate upside play, but like Mims is nowhere near as safe floor wise as Barden. So, you tell me, would you rather take the tackle that's hugely boomer bust, could be Isaiah Wilson in the worst way, like I don't mean character wise, but Isaiah Wilson, or could be Tyron Smith, or would you rather take Graham Barden, who could be easily like Elijah Vera Tucker level type of player immediately? So I mean, it's a trade-off, right? It's the risk you take.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, especially with a first round pick, you want to have a guy that can play, but you need some upside. And that's what Graham Barden does provide, is that upside, but as well as the floor. I will agree, non-biasedly, of course, that Amarius Mims has probably a higher ceiling, just off his physical profile. But at the end of the day, he also has that floor. So both guys I can see in the first round. I'm sure Amarius Mims is locked in the first round. Graham Barden is one I'll be watching on Thursday to see if he actually makes it in the first round, because I know you've been kind of semi pounding the table for him, and this is also one of your guys that you've been high on for a while. I wouldn't have even he wouldn't be on my radar if it wasn't for you early on.
I will say Amarius Mims should go in the first round. If he stays healthy and gets great coaching, like you got an elite tackle on your hands. So it's just going to be a matter of if he can stay healthy with his size and such. So that's all I got to say about him.
So I want to talk about Dallas Turner and Jared Verse real quickly, because there's a lot of talk. And obviously Latu is in that big three as well, but we've talked about why he's ranked a little bit lower for you, or he would be in the top 10. But with Jared Verse and Dallas Turner, we've seen a pretty consensus divide that Dallas Turner is that edge one, and honestly, Jared Verse is probably that edge three consensus wise that I've been seeing. He's usually getting drafted over them, if not Verse and Latu a little bit together at the later end of the draft. What exactly do you continue to see with Jared Verse that continuously ranks him over both Latu and, of course, Dallas Turner?
Well, so like I said, Latu is the medicals, flat out. Like he would be my edge one if it wasn't for the medical issues. Verse versus Turner, it's pass rush plan and repertoire. I feel much more comfortable. I know Verse is going to be coming in older than Turner, but I feel much more comfortable with a guy that I know has, a deep pass rush bag with, multiple moves that can win. And he's won with them in the games. Like that's the thing, not just like tried it out and lost. And then on top of that, like he's planning out what he's doing ahead of time and knows how he's going to attack on certain plays. So he's just set up for success because of his preparation. Whereas Turner, I don't feel as comfortable with how his pass rush plan presents itself on film to me. And it may be a scheme thing there, but I can't tell for sure. Overall, though, like they're both very good players. Obviously, they're very close, 10 and 14, I want to say. So it's like, if you really want, it depends on what you want and what you need, right? So like Dallas Turner is probably going to fit as a 3-4 outside edge rusher better than Verse, but Verse is definitely going to be a way better like 4-3 in my opinion. So it's just kind of, what do you want? Where do you want to play these guys? Do you want to take a guy that is going to give you, once his 5 years are up as a first round pick, he's near 30. So it's like, do you want, like, he may not be a guy you want to give a second contract to, or do you want to take Turner, who once his 5 years are up, he's still going to be in his mid 20s and you could give him another 5-year deal if he's an elite player and like it be fine for the most part until you have the cap issues and such, as we see so often.
That
But
makes sense to me. It does. Like, we just say so. Versus is gonna be a little bit of the safer known entity versus Dallas Turner, and again, it's more of a scheme fit thing. Whether it's a 4-3 or 3-4, like you would take one over the other. Like, is there a world that you would take Dallas Turner over Jared Verse, even though you have them ranked differently?
There's a world where I would do it, but it's a very like specific scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Truthfully,
Yeah.
I think the theme you're hitting on it. The theme with this board this year for me is like safety is kind of the guys that have pushed themselves to the top. The guys that I feel are safely going to be contributors, which isn't always my approach. But even like looking at Joe Alt over Fasciano and Latham, looking at Verse over Turner and Latu, Caleb over the other ones, Bauer so high, Marvin over Neighbors. Like I Spartan so high. Like I've come to value guys I feel comfortable having a solid floor.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like I said, that's not always my approach, but it's just how things ended up this year.
Yeah, and so I just the first thing that people see when they look at this page is it's gonna be clear. It's also the brightest one on the screen, but it's gonna be Caleb Williams, superstar, next guy up quarterback. He's gonna be ranked 5, which obviously is a big board. So just because he's not ranked 1 doesn't mean he's not gonna go 1.1 because he's going to Chicago on Thursday. He's gonna be the first pick, but to see him all the way down at 5, and I say all the way down like it's that far, but I've seen him at 1, of course. I've seen him at 2 and 3, but having him down at 5, what's your reasoning behind that? Because obviously the guys ahead of him, Marvin Harrison at 1, Malik Neighbors at 2, Joel at 3, and Bart Bowers at 4, are very extremely special talent. But what makes Caleb not ranked higher than some of those guys?
Yeah, so that's kind of a tough question to answer, truthfully. I like Caleb. Clearly, he's my number 1 QB, top 5 player. If I was Chicago, I am taking Caleb Williams at number 1. I'm not like trying to pass on him to take Marvin or anything like that.
There's no debating that.
Just so I'm on the record with that. I'm not trying to say that. So like I said, like I grade everything in positional, and then I adjust everything based on a standardized set scale for each position. Caleb hit a certain tier for me, and then Bowers, Alt, Neighbors, and Harrison all hit that higher tier. And even with the adjustments, it just didn't come out to where that Caleb would pass up any of those guys. That's really all it is.
So they're essentially all really close.
So I have Marvin in a tier of his own, and then Neighbors, Alt, and Bowers are within their own tiers. So Marvin's labeled an elite prospect for me, which is pretty much as high as you can be without being perfect. And then Neighbors, Alt, and Bowers are that third tier for me. So the second realistic tier of a round 1 player that I think has an all-pro, ceiling. And then I'm not saying like Caleb doesn't, but Caleb, Olu, and Latham are in that next tier where they're future Pro Bowlers to me in my eyes. Maybe it's a thing I need to self-reflect on and adjust how I grade quarterbacks and such. But it's just Caleb's a couple tiers, like 1 tier down from the other guys, and that's the reasoning for him being at 5.
Yeah, he's still special though.
Yes, definitely. And it's just those top 4 guys are very special at their own positions is what it is. Like I think each one of those top 4 guys has the potential to be like a top 5 overall like player at their position. So
yeah,
I'm not saying Caleb doesn't, but it's much harder for Caleb to get there than those guys.
That makes perfect sense. Real quickly, do you have any other guys you want to mention that fell out of the top 50 that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah. So we'll talk about Max Melton real quick. He cornerback, Rutgers, came in at 51 on my board. He's a fun guy to watch. His brother, Bo Melton, is currently an NFL wide receiver. Max has some issues that caused him to drop a little bit to me. Like his tackling needs a lot of work. He had a 26.7 missed tackle percentage per PFF this past year, which is like, that's pretty high.
Yeah.
And he could be a little bit frenetic in zone coverage. Like that's the way it came off to me, where like he leans one way and then all of a sudden he'll lean back one way and then like the play goes below him, but like, and then he starts leaning back that way. It's like almost like he doesn't either trust his own instincts and eyes, or he's not trusting that his teammates are doing their jobs correctly in the zone coverage. So it kind of like he just needs to be a little bit more decisive, a little bit more trusting of his own eyes, and like I think he would put himself in better positions almost. But dude's a good athlete. He's really smooth in his pedal, so I think he's got like a good future as a starter, truthfully. But like I said, just missed out at 51. My dog is chewing my arm. And then the other guy that we'll hit on is the quarterback that didn't make it into the top 50 that I'm sure is going to be a little controversial. I have Michael Penix at 55. It's just Penix. I think I don't know. I like to me, the opinion on him is like the ultimate. Are you actually watching what he's doing, or are you just watching the results? You see, I think he's going to be a good backup quarterback, and I think he's going to be like a guy that's going to stick around for a while as a backup quarterback. If you're saying he's a first-round pick, I can't trust you as an evaluator, like at this point. And this may be something I eat crow on, like as always. But
well, at the end of the day, I mean, just because they could just be predicting that he's going to get taken in the first round, not necessarily that they actually believe he is. But two, also, if he does get picked in the first round, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to eat crow.
For sure. It's going to be like if he turns into a productive player, for sure, is when I would eat crow. If you're saying like you truly value him as like a first round quarterback, you would take him in the first round. I can't trust you until I eat crow and he does become like a first round pick and becomes productive down the road. And the reason being is like when I say you're watching him versus the results, is like if you're watching him, you're seeing a guy that does a lot of things really well, but his accuracy is just not what it needs to be a first round quarterback. He puts the ball close enough, but not where the pinpoint spot it needs to be. Like, and the other quarterbacks in this class will do that. And when I say watching the results, what I mean by that is, the receptions that happen, the plays that his receivers will make for him, adjusting to the ball to make those catches or getting yards after the catch, things like that. So his stats look a lot better than what I think he actually is producing. And I'm not trying to dunk on him. It's just like you gotta put the ball, if you're running a certain route, whatever, like you say you're running an out route, you got to put the ball to the receivers, outside for them to catch it in stride. If you're putting the ball behind them and if they catch it, like, yeah, they're catching it and that's positive for your stats, but that's not, you're giving up yardage doing that. That's not what the quarterback needs to do. And that's what I see him do a lot. Things like that. Not necessarily like exactly that, but like in general.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Michael Penix either. I wouldn't want him in the first round. Honestly, like I think his ceiling really is going to be like the guy who has like a 10-year NFL career, possibly, depending on his age. But he's going to have a solid NFL career as far as like a journeyman backup, maybe get some spot starts, a bridge quarterback before the next guy comes in, takes over for injury. That I just feel like that's just going to be a ceiling, and you don't necessarily want to draft that guy with a high pick, let alone round one. probably don't even want to draft a guy like that in round 2 or round 3. Let's be honest. You can always find a guy that can cover for an injury or a bridge.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, let's put it this way: Colt McCoy had like a 15-year NFL career as a backup,
mhm,
and then like Chase Daniel
yeah,
had like
the
50
most famous
million in
one.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah, like and but um Tyler Huntley is like another guy that's sticking around a while. But like,
yeah,
guys like Penix, if his mind is like sharp and like in tune with like what it needs to be, which I'm assuming it is like I haven't heard anything otherwise. Um yeah, like you said, he's gonna have a long career as a backup at worst because you get an athletic guy that's got a good arm that's that has a good mind. That's
yeah.
valuable. Teams are going to keep that as long as he's not making problems in the locker room
Yeah.
or with the starter or anything like that.
Like you said, it's kind of like that Teddy Bridgewater career. Now he obviously had a lot of hope as well. Injury, unfortunately, kind of derailed a lot of that. But now he's in a nice little. He'll bounce around from team to team. He gets those starts. If the starting quarterback is failing him, as long as it's not like a highly paid, highly touted quarterback, he kind of gets in there, shows what he can do. He can win games. He can manage games, and I think that's just what Penix is going to actually end up doing is just kind of managing games and managing his career throughout until he
Yeah.
retires and have a nice, solid, but not a first round career.
To connect it to another Detroit Lions quarterback from this past season, I mean, he still is a Detroit Lions guy, but
Yeah.
different reasons. But Hendon Hooker, like
Yeah.
talented quarterback, athletic guy, but for various reasons, he's really not a true first round quarterback, and he's not a guy that I would project as a starter going forward.
But cool. That's going to wrap up today's episode of the Empirical Scouting Podcast. Go ahead and give us a follow on all social media platforms at empirical_scout. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go ahead and give us a 5-star rating. And if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and click that like and subscribe button below. For Taylor, I'm Taylor, and that's Chipper. And we'll see y'all next time. Peace.
1,